We are getting going. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are here on March 4th, 2021 with the Houston Electric Auto Association. Welcome, everyone. It's really good to see people here. I see we've got about 27 folks online so far, which is good, and more joining. And tonight we have Bailey, Muller, and let me call up what it was that I wanted to have in place, but I was admitting folks, and so I kind of got a little bit behind on that. All right, so it's really exciting to have you here, Bailey, and to have you being able to talk to us about incentives here in Texas that a number of them I'm sure apply all around the country. So a little bit background on Bailey. Bailey joined the Transportation Department of the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which has the acronym NCTCOG, in January 2016. And she currently serves as the Senior Air Quality Planner there. Much of her work falls under the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition, the local chapter of a Department of Energy program focused on increasing energy efficiency in the transportation sector. Her responsibilities include focus on electric vehicles and infrastructure, government policy and readiness, and energy efficiency. So all those things that folks here are very interested in. And so Bailey, if you, we talked about it, I think if you share your screen, you should be able to do that. We can then see your slides as you present.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen up here?
See you at the moment. It usually takes a second for the transition.
Just let me know when that pops up.
Okay.
Well, when that's popping up, I can just kind of give that intro. Like I just said, I'm Bailey Muller. I'm a planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, which is basically a fancier, very longer term for we're the regional planning agency for the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So we do the 16 counties across Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so there is that sister council of governments down by y'all, which is the Houston Galveston area council, as well as they also house their Houston Galveston Clean Cities Coalition as well. And so we work very closely with you guys many times. We share lots of data. We are all kind of on that same track to see adoption of EVs growing at a faster and faster and more efficient rate across Texas. And so we're very excited to be talking to you guys today to show some data that we've been working on and some tools and some important info we want to share. Is that slide showing up yet?
No, it's still seeing you.
Hang on one second. Let me try.
I selected the multi already.
Interesting.
And Colin, I've made you co-host in case we get more folks coming in.
So, okay. That popping up now?
It's starting. Yep, there it is.
Okay. It just required another click. Okay. So, like I said, just getting started. This is kind of a background just of our Council of Governments, just like I had just previously said. The map on the left is who and where we cover within our regional planning. The red zone basically means that we are in ozone non-attainment. Houston Galveston is also in ozone non-attainment, which basically means we don't meet those EPA standards for the ozone non-attainment. And most of ozone is caused by either volatile organic compounds or nitrogen oxides, or more commonly known as VOCs or NOx. And the majority of those are from the transportation sector. And so a lot of our job in the transportation department in the air quality specifically is to try to see those NOx and VOCs go down. And so electric vehicles are one of those avenues that we're seeing. So higher EV adoption rates can help decrease ozone trends. And we're really trying to reach that because we've been in ozone non-attainment for quite some time. Many of you guys are aware because of your interest in this group, EVs in Texas. A lot of people, when they think of EVs, are not really sure about what we're talking about. And so all the EVs that we're discussing throughout this presentation will be those fuel cell electric vehicles. They're not as common around here yet. but the plug-in electric vehicles, the PHEVs, as well as those full battery electric vehicles. And so as a general snapshot in Texas, we have approximately 37,000 EVs registered in Texas as of March 1st, 2021. And of that breakdown, there's approximately 28% of those are plug-in hybrids and 72% are battery electric hybrids. And so we're getting all this information. We actually do this in-house at the NCTCOG that I manage this. So we get the DMV data from Texas, all the registered vehicles, and then we do an internal query with some decoded VINs, because as people register their vehicles, there is no note that says if it's electric, if it's not electric. So it's been a nationwide issue of trying to figure out how to count EVs and how to get a better kind of image of where EVs are. So we have to do a couple extra steps and internal kind of tools to try to figure that out. And so we're one of the people across the state that are providing that information. And so all of the information and data you're seeing that we're going to showcase here is based upon those internal analysis that we're doing in-house. And so from the state perspective here, this is a historic kind of registration trend that you can see. On the left starts in 2012. That's pretty much when the first commercially available EV came on the market. It was around 2011, 2010. And so you see it was less than 1,000 across Texas. And 2020 today, you see it's that above that 37,000. Over 2020, we did see a small dip in registration of EVs. We don't think that that is consistent and going to move forward. We are expecting that growth to really move up again soon. There was a lot of factors with the pandemic. People weren't registering vehicles because the DMVs were closed. There was a lot of economic hardships. People weren't going out and buying more cars, and people weren't needing their cars as much because we were kind of quarantined. And so that is a trend that we're going to continue to monitor, but we are already seeing a lot of that upward trend again. You can see that little uptick right there. That's July of 2020, and that's going back up. So we're already back up at what we were at the beginning of 2020. Right now, at the beginning of 2021, we're at that same rate. And so we're hoping to see the actual growth rates increase to what we had been seeing. In the past 5 years, we were seeing on average an annual growth rate of approximately 32% a year. And so that was really great. And it caused a lot of change. And when people are seeing that amount of growth year after year after year, that's what's causing people and pushing people to start those investments, to increase infrastructure development, to increase basically ease of EVs across the state as well as across the country. And just for this, the yellow line, I realize I didn't explain this. The yellow line is the total EVs. The red line is growth of battery electric vehicles. And then the gray is those plug-in hybrids. You see this mid 2018 is when the Model 3 came out, Tesla Model 3. And that's what you see with that skyrocket right there. And why we're paying attention to it so much right now is because this is the growth projections and forecasts for EVs into the future. We monitor as many studies as we possibly can and try to track those in order to get a better idea of how it will impact our local economy and our local planning efforts. And so right now, you see in 2020, we are less than 1% of all vehicles are EVs. There are projections that vary from around 15% to 55% of all vehicles will be EVs by 2040. That's 19 years away. And that is not a long time to have that significant of a change. And so with the need of fueling structures and charging structures and everything like that, we're really trying to get on municipalities and jurisdictions to create that kind of policy, the codes, all of the framework that they need in order to be ready for that increase and influx of EVs to be on the road. And so we are working with that and utilizing these. The numbers did come down a little bit in the last year in projections just because of the pandemic, but they didn't jump down too hard. So as a breakdown of Texas EVs by region, Dallas-Fort Worth area has approximately 36.9% of all EVs in the state. Houston, you guys have approximately 22.57%, and then Austin's comparable to you guys. San Antonio's less, and then the other is every other part of the state that's not those urbanized areas. And so, like I noted before, we have interactive EV registration tools for both North Texas. We have a very specific North Texas separate one. And then we also have a statewide electric registration tool. That's where all of these graphs are coming from. And you can access those on our dfwcleancities.org/event. They are powered through Microsoft Power BI, and so they are automatically updated every Tuesday with new vehicle registration data. And so that is something that we pass along to different stakeholders to utilize. If you guys want to get a better idea of where EVs are hitting, you can see that, and then it goes down to a bigger breakdown. We're able to see it by county breakdown as well as by city breakdown. I believe the state, I know the region has, forgive me for forgetting this, I mainly work in our regional data, but regional data in North Texas, we go down all the way to the zip code. I believe that our state data also has zip code. You just have to go, there's different tabs in that tool. So you can see all the way to break down to that to kind of get a better idea of where EVs are currently within the area and kind of where you need to fill those gaps.
And things like that link we should have available with these slides on our website after.
These are all hyperlinked. So yeah, I made sure to have all those hyperlinked and you guys can access it, or feel free to ask us questions, ping us whenever. Our contact information is also on there. This is another snapshot. So this is a snapshot from that tool that we have, and that's always varying. This is another snapshot. It breaks it down by EVs and makes and models. You can see by the large chunks, the larger the color, the more registered vehicles of that make and model there are. And so you can see Tesla pretty much dominates the whole state with over 50% of all EVs being Teslas. It's not surprising, but that is something to take into consideration because, like we all know, Teslas have proprietary plugs, they have proprietary infrastructure. And so when we're doing our planning, we can't take Tesla into account. So when we're doing infrastructure analysis, we have to remove Tesla from that because we're doing infrastructure analysis for everyone, not just for people with Teslas. And so you can see that with that, but as more and more EVs are coming onto the market, you see that this is diversifying more and more. So it is something really fun to kind of see, and it is interactive. So when you're on the tool and you hover over it, it tells you how many of each are within that.
And of course, Tesla owners can use the small adapter that comes with it for up to L2 charging on public infrastructure.
And then going on to this is an EVs as a percentage of all registered vehicles. So this is basically comparable to that projection slide that I just went over. And so Austin is at 1% is the highest EV percentage of all their vehicles in the state so far. They're a little over 1%. DFW, a little further behind that with 0.56% of all vehicles, Houston at 0.43%, San Antonio at 0.38%, and then the rest of the state outside of those major urbanized areas is 0.13%. And so this is what we're anticipating to get up to around 30 to 40% of all vehicles by 2040. And so that's a huge, huge change. And so that's why we're working with and really promoting this funding and incentives now, so people get ready and they're able to utilize that funding to lessen the cost to be EV ready in the future. Fuel corridors are something that we are consistently working on for the past 4 years. Houston is also working on this as well. It's a national network of alternative fuel highway systems that people can guarantee meet a certain level of criteria. So for electric corridors, basically you can guarantee if it's designated as a EV ready corridor by the Federal Highways Administration, you can guarantee that there's going to be a DC fast charging station every 50 miles within 5 miles of the highway. And so that is something, when you see it as green, we've already done that analysis. Federal Highways has already checked that off, and it shows that you can get from point A to point B without any worry about range anxiety. Right now, Houston to Dallas is not fit. Houston right now is kind of in an island that you can see. In order to get to the other urbanized areas, there has to be more investment within those gap communities. It's a little harder because you're not dealing with the large urban funding, the large urban stakeholders that have that. And so you're trying to find people that are willing to put stations in these smaller towns, or working with the state to try to see if they have different community partners that are willing to invest within those community areas to get that. Electrify America does a lot of their work in trying to connect those urbanized areas in those places that don't really have a lot of money or funds or intelligence on EVs to get that moving. And so that is something that we are consistently working on to try to fill those gaps because it's in our best interest as well. And so the I-45 corridor, this is something that we were awarded as a secondary project within the alternative fuels corridor by federal highways. And it's basically working with Houston to make a plan to outline a strategy for building infrastructure on I-45 between Dallas and Houston for electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, with an emphasis on medium and heavy duty trucks and buses. So this would have an emphasis on that freight movement from Houston to Dallas. But with that infrastructure investment for the medium and heavy duty trucks, that would also increase the flexibility of charging for light duty vehicles on that corridor as well. So they're working on finalizing that plan by the end of this spring, and then working, when they have that plan finalized, that'll be working to actually start implementing that plan. But all of this stuff, Federal Highways has all these interactive maps where you can just basically Google Federal Highways alternative fuel corridors, see exactly where they are, and then you're able to see if you want to drive across the country at a very quick glance, you know that Highway 35 is good to go. And so it's a pretty cool tool. It's also for other alternative fuels as well, but we're focusing on EVs today. So levels of charging, you guys are, I'm sure, very aware of this. There's the level 1, that's at 110 volts. The numbers right here on the left, and it says 32 in Texas. This is from the publicly available charging stations. This is not comprehensive. If it's a private station, if it's a station at home, that's not in these numbers. So these are all from that alternative fuel alt fuel database center through the Department of Energy. They have a station locator, and that's who we do all of our station analysis through. And so that is pretty comprehensive. They have APIs, automatic APIs with the major infrastructure companies. And then they have all the Clean Cities coalitions across the country also doing quality control to make sure all those stations are up to date. And so level 1 in Texas, mainly if people are trying to access a level 1 public charger, that's very rare, which is why there's so little of them. But they get approximately 2 to 5 miles per hour of charge. They're by far the cheapest type of charger to put in because they're not pulling that much energy. And so they're approximately $500 to $800 to install. Level 2 chargers, most common ones we see, there's almost 3,000 across Texas. That gets the 10 to 20 miles per charge, depending on all the features they have. If it's networked, if it's just kind of a dummy charger where you just plug in, any of the features like that can range in price from about $1,000 to $3,000. And then the DC fast chargers, those are the ones that are really just for those kind of interstate corridors. You need to get in, you need to get out fast. That's why it's super expensive, because it's pulling so much energy at such a fast rate. There's only 273 of those in Texas, but it gets 60 to 80 miles per 20 minutes of charge. But you can see the comparison of that. They range from approximately $28,000 to $140,000. And so that's a lot of money for people to be investing in that, which is why we are very selective on who and what we're telling people to invest in when they are looking at charging systems, because most people are like, well, why wouldn't I want the fastest? It's like, well, there's a time and a place for it, you know? And so we'll get into a little bit more details on that in a bit. But day in the life of an average car, I'm just going over this super quick, just to give people an idea of where and how people are charging. More than 80% of charging is done at people's homes. And so that is really important to know. And so workplaces, people are spending 2 to 8 hours in workplaces, 9+ hours at home. In public, they're spending 30 to 3.5 hours. And so at a workplace, you're not going to invest in that DC fast. You don't need that speed. So why spend that money on that? And so you can see this kind of pyramid at the bottom. We call it the EV hierarchy pyramid. And that means there needs to be the majority of chargers at people's homes, secondary at workplaces, and then the top is those public places. I'm trying to fill in that kind of amount, because you can't have an influx of public stations and then no workplace stations and no home stations. We need to kind of have that relationship of proportions of stations across when you're looking at investing in more. And this is what people wanted to hear today, current funding. And so funding right now, most of it is geared towards infrastructure. And so the Volkswagen settlement has been the talk of the town for years. People were very excited about it. It was mention. It's going to drop for so long. And then finally, this past year in 2020, it did. And so it does have a timeline. Latest you can apply for it is September 8th, 2021, but it is a first come, first serve. And so with this Volkswagen settlement, it is for level 2 charging right now. It's for the purchase and installation of those light duty level 2 charging, up to $2,500 per installation. and cannot exceed 70% of the total cost for a publicly available charger, and cannot exceed 60% of the total cost for workplace or multi-unit dwellings. And so when they differentiate those, basically, if you're at a multi-unit dwelling and it's behind a fence where not everyone can access it and only tenants can access it, that is something that can be charged for with this. If it is in front of the house where anyone can access it at all, that's considered publicly available. So basically, you can have these semi-private stations just for workers or employees and just for tenants, and it can still get funding, which is very rare. Most of the time, private stations aren't getting that same funding that public stations are getting. But we are focusing as well, the alternative fuel infrastructure tax credit was extended this year. It used to expire December 31st, 2020. And with that new stimulus package, the latest stimulus package, it was extended to December 31st, 2021. And this can be double dipped with that Volkswagen settlement money. And so you can get up to 30% of costs of that EVSE, not to exceed $30,000. And so if you guys are private entities and are wanting to invest in that, utilizing both of those before the end of the year can be a huge, huge cost benefit for you guys. And so we have a website that we house in our Council of Government. So nctcog.org/AQ funding. We have all the different funding opportunities that we list. We have them linked. They're also hyperlinked right here. But if you ever lose this PowerPoint or just need a quick place to kind of look at different funding opportunities that are open, definitely look at that. We're really diligent about making sure that it's up to date with the latest and greatest.
That's really helpful. Yeah. And on this call right now, we have Lisa Lou and Emily and Emma, and some of us have been talking about workplace charging. And so, yeah, we'll make note of that website there and be able to check.
That's great. And going off of that, we actually do a lot more workplace charging and multi-unit dwelling analysis in-house as well. We've created a bunch of resources that we're trying to utilize regionally to promote that. Workplace charging is super important because people are there for such a big portion of their day. And for a workplace, it can show a public commitment to being sustainable. You can double your EV commuting range for your employees, and then you can plan and accommodate early to save that money. If you're doing any construction costs, if you're doing any new builds, building out to be EV ready at the beginning and having that conduit laid out really does discount the costs later when you want to get that station installed. And so having that idea of how many stations you'll potentially want in the future and planning for that in the beginning is really important for people, especially if they don't have a lot of flexible funding. And so we have these different flyers and different resources that we have on our Clean Cities page. So either dfwcleancities.org/workplace charging or dfwcleancities.org/multifamily. We have those different resources and links and stuff to different information in regards to those. Multifamily is extremely important because people, like that fact I said earlier, 80% of people charge at home. People with multifamily who live in apartments don't have that ability to do that. And so they don't have their own garage, they don't have their own plugs that they can do. And so having the property managers install those would allow these people to actually have the ability to own an EV without having to worry about where am I going to charge my car? Because that is one of the most underserved communities within EVs right now. One of the biggest factors with EVs is that they don't have any place to charge their vehicle. And so we're really pushing that and doing a lot of outreach for that, especially with this Volkswagen funding, because like I said, most of the time those private stations aren't eligible for the same funding that publicly available stations are. But with this, there was about $10.5 million allocated for those level 2 charging stations within that Volkswagen settlement right now. It is first come, first served, like I noted. And so we're constantly tracking who has applied for what and what's been awarded. Right now, it's only been open for a few months. And so right now, only around 132,000 has been awarded. An additional 532 has been requested. So there's about $9.8 million remaining. And so whenever that goes up or September 8th or 7th is reached, that's when we will stop basically this opportunity. 213 activities have been requested. And of that, around 50% has been multifamily charging, around 41% has been public place charging, and then 10% of that has been at workplace. And so we're tracking this. It's been really interesting so far to see who has been requesting what. This is the geographic distribution of where the blue color counties are, what county has had requested funds and by how much. You can see Houston has a big chunk of that highest blue color of who has requested funds, and all of this and who has been requesting anything is available on that Texas VW Fund website. You can download to see exactly who applied for what and how much and what type of stations. And so the orange dots on here are existing public EV charging stations. And so, like everyone assumed, most of the stations are clustered within those urbanized areas, as well as most of the funding that's being requested is clustered in the urbanized areas. You do see some outliers of these counties over here. There's been this county in here that are outside those major urbanized areas and outside of the Volkswagen settlement priority areas as well. But we're trying to really fill those gaps where you see the stations, or you see counties like here in between Houston and Dallas. You don't have any of these counties with any of those orange dots. So we really want to try to focus on trying to get some of those counties lit up blue that connect those urbanized areas that we want to see. Current incentives for EVs. The only EV incentive for vehicles right now out is that federal tax credit. And like we all know, it phases out based on manufacturer market sales. And so not every vehicle has the ability to get the full tax incentive for that. It covers passenger, light duty trucks, and certain 2- and 3-wheeled vehicles. There are other opportunities for other vehicles and fleets, including heavy duty, medium duty. And so if you guys know any fleets that you think have a current diesel or older truck that can benefit from an EV in their fleet, they can get funding for turning in that diesel vehicle. And so pass this information along. Those heavy duty cars are emitting way more emissions than these light duty cars. And so if you see these dirty trucks or school buses, they can benefit from this. We actually got the first electric school bus in the state within our region last year, and they got 4. And so it's been really cool talking to them to see how, even in this weird school year, how those electric school buses are faring for them. But we encourage you to pass it along because people don't know about it unless someone tells them. And so we're trying to be the shepherd of information to you guys so you guys can continue to spread it around. The Texas light duty EV rebate, here's some updates. It did expire. This last round expired on January 7th. And so it's no longer available currently. Of that round that it was open, around 1,300 rebates were awarded. Only 2,000 were allocated in total. And so there were around 600 something that were not grabbed at the end. But we're hoping that the next round, when it does open, people can take advantage of that. But it covered up to $2,500 rebate for any vehicle with a battery of at least 4 kilowatt hours. And so this is funded through TERP, that Texas Emission Reduction Plan. And so there's a couple updates right now of how that might change in the future. The Electric Transportation Act, for those of you that are not aware of that, this was a bill and an act that was authored by the TxETRA, which is the Texas Electric Transportation Resources Alliance. It's pretty comprehensive. If you guys are interested in this stuff, it is really interesting, really comprehensive of tons of different EV issues that have been plaguing us for years. And so it includes road tax, it includes allowing charging stations to charge by kilowatt rather than time, all of that. And so it was filed on 2/24 by Representative Canales, and it is House Bill 2221. They are anticipating that to go to hearing by the end of March. And so for those who have any interest in that or supporting that, we do encourage you to go to TxETRA and contact them to see how you can support that in different ways or get more information on that. But basically, it was an expansive file, like I just said, and encompassed topics: creation of comprehensive charging network across the state, EV adoption, which is the update to the EV rebate, EV charging stuff, EV road use fees, retail electric service, battery recycling, as well as the timing of it all. And so in regard to this rebate, it proposed updates to the incentive that would require a dealer and leasing agent to credit the incentive payment to the buyer for the new vehicle at the time of sale. So this is really important because basically it looks like a large discount at the time of sale. Previously, people had to leave, buy the vehicle at full, and then you leave and then submit all your paperwork and then receive that rebate later. And so with this, a lot of people, we think that this could push a lot of more people to make that sale, as well as be used by the dealers as kind of an incentive to push that EV, because it looks like they're getting more off, even though that person would have gotten that anyways. How many people are going to go through the process to actually submit that paperwork after? So it's just the ease in process. And then they would also increase it if this goes through to provide light duty truck incentives of up to $4,000. So these are all those new EV pickup trucks that are coming out that are a little bit more expensive, but it would include them there. And then it would allow TERP trust fund to accept federal funds to continue to be used in the allotment of what they're awarding for people. And so
a lot on this slide here. When I looked through them, I hadn't caught that the rebate of the 2,500 expired.
yes,
So that's good for folks to know if they were contemplating like next week or something buying
yeah,
a car. And then, as you mentioned, the TechCetra has a lot in it. One thing that caught my eye when I read it was the proposal for a $100 per EV fee, and that is to replace the gas taxes, which of course are not collected from EVs. And I think most of our members, they're not afraid to pay something to replace gas taxes, but we know that in the past, there have been some really outlandish sized fees proposed. So I think 100 is pretty reasonable. So that would add 100 per year to a vehicle's registration and EV's registration. So this is great that you've got all this on this slide here.
Yeah, for sure. And this is linked to that act. If you guys like to read legislation, I know it's kind of like burning your eyes looking at that. It's not easy to read, but it's interesting to read. And then this is linked to that TechCetra page, which they have bill summaries, which are a little bit easier to kind of just get the gist of it and move on. And so, like I said before, these are really exciting changes. If this goes through, Canales, who filed it, is the head of the Transportation Committee. And so we're hoping that that has some clout with that. But like we said, it was probably going to go to hearing at the end of March. So until then, we don't really know anything. We can't really do anything as a COG. We can't lobby. We can't do anything, but we can see how it would impact our region and whether we generally support it or not, and give people their information to see what they can do with it. And so if you guys like it, if you guys want more information, definitely contact TechCetra, and they would love to get your input, I'm sure.
Hey Bailey, this is Kevin Douglas. We're actually members of TechCetra. We joined as one of the organizations, and I'm on the advisory board for TechCetra, and we're actually having an update meeting tomorrow on next steps for the Electric Transportation Act. So we're engaged, and
we're excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I see a question in the chat here from Bianca. Any opportunities for EVs to use tolls and HOV lanes at no cost? Some of the West Coast states have this instead.
At least I don't know in Houston, but DFW area, it's an absolute no-go. They are very adamant. We have these things called managed lanes. And so basically it's a pay per, you can guarantee your car will go 60 miles an hour. So what are you going to pay to guarantee your car is going to go 60 miles an hour? If there's really bad congestion, you're paying more to get into that lane. They're not doing any sort of rebates or discounts, at least in DFW. I'm not sure if that's a statewide issue or if that's just a regional thing. I think it might be a state thing, but I don't think that they're legally allowed to discount tolls, but I'm not really sure. So that's something that I could look into and I can get back to you guys on for sure. But yeah, the West Coast states do have that discount for EVs or hybrids within tolls or free into HOV lanes. But yeah, we don't have that, at least in North Texas.
Okay, thanks.
And then moving on with this, there's some opportunities coming up soon. The TERP, that Texas Emission Reduction Plan, also has an alternative fueling facilities program, or commonly known as AFFP. And this funds those alternative fuel stations of not just EV, but a bunch of alternative fuels, including just EV chargers. This is not just level 2 chargers. It can be level 1, DC fast, any sort of charger. And that cover 50% of total eligible costs with a maximum of $600,000 for EV chargers. So if you're looking for those DC fast within the TERP program, you can definitely look at this program. I know that we've had some discussions of potentially looking into expanding the use of those off-grid chargers. And so if you guys have seen the like EV Arc is an example of that, it's kind of off-grid, self-sustained, uses solar panels to create power for the stations. And so they can be placed in areas that don't require any grid connection. And then when the power's out, they obviously are self-sustaining. And so that is a potential another use with these funds. But the Volkswagen settlement is releasing a DC fast charger full funding round after this level 2 round. It might overlap a little bit. They haven't given us any date about when they're going to release that, but it will be a significantly larger funding level than that $2,500 for the level 2. And so what we're trying to promote with you guys might not be the people that are implementing stations. You're much more invested in your personal vehicles and general public vehicles, but you can work with stakeholders. You can promote and push this information to others, planning ahead for stations. So when funding's announced, it's ready to go. A lot of the times they are first come, first serve and are a little hefty in paperwork. And so you can analyze, look at where the station gaps are. Do you have any connections with these people? Do you have any connections? Is your city a gap? Can you work with your city planners or maybe if you have a large library or something, you can put some stations there and work with them and or a really popular restaurant or destination, working with those management companies to try to get more stations involved. Because a lot of the times these people, like I said, it's not on their mind to think about if they need stations or if funding is available whatsoever. So engage different stakeholders, pass along information, and try to get them installed, including like workplaces, cities, businesses. And so that's pretty much the gist of what I had today. I know it's a lot of information in a quick amount of time, but I'm happy to take any general questions you guys have. And my contact information is there, and our DFW Clean Cities page is there, which has a lot of resources on it. So you guys can feel free to email me whenever you want. We love to help people out with questions or anything in regards to EVs or just general DFW related planning questions in general.
This is great. Yeah. So people want to ask questions verbally or in the chat?
It's fine either way for me.
I have a question. I was wondering if your fast food restaurants like McDonald's, if there is much of an incentive for them to have charging stations, particularly on those McDonald's that are like halfway between the major cities, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an incentive to have businesses that have that. Those larger national chains are a little bit more difficult because most of the time that owner of that specific site doesn't have as much power. If it's like a personal business, they have full power of, yes, they want it, they can move forward with it. And so that is something that you could still try to promote to them, but it might be a little harder unless they do have a national initiative to move forward with that. But that's like where Electrify America is coming in. They're making those national partnerships like with Walmart. And so they are partnering with Walmarts across the country and Sam's Clubs. And so they're going through, they already know they have this partnership. A site aligns with where they want to install something, and they kind of already have that gateway to move forward with that.
Thanks.
Okay, so a couple of things in the chat. I don't know if Bailey, if you can see the chat. And you might be able to pull it up.
I'm just seeing it right now.
So
So yes,
first-
we do have a mailing list. You can go on to dfwcleancities.org and connect with us. It's at the very bottom. You can join our mailing list. It's a lot of information that's probably DFW related, and most of the work we do is aligned for fleets. And so that one is probably going to be a little bit more expansive. And so I would encourage everyone to go to our Electric Vehicles North Texas website, which is that same dfwcleancities.org/EVNT. And you could sign up for just our EV related sign up for that.
Very good.
And so Dallas, yes, has more EVs than Austin and Houston. I think that is probably to do with the fact that our region is slightly larger. We have Dallas and Fort Worth together, and our kind of footprint of the region is a little larger than Houston, just in general by itself. And so I don't necessarily think that we are more impassioned about EVs by any means. I think that it has to do a lot with just our footprint in general. And then did you say level 3 incentive program was in development? Yes, that's the DC fast charging. That is going to be available sometime this year, probably late summer, early fall, with that Volkswagen settlement money, and then that alternate fueling facilities program through the Texas Emission Reduction Plan. That should be released later this year as well, which funds a larger threshold. So that could cover both level 2 as well as that DC fast charging. And we will send you guys the slide deck, and those hyperlinks are all within that. And so what happens with the funds not allocated for rebates or charging infrastructure? For the actual TERP funds, that's a trust fund right now. And so any of those TERP EV rebates, those 700 rebates that weren't utilized, that'll just go back into the TERP fund where it'll be cycled through new programs. And so nothing's happening with that. I'm not quite exactly sure with the Volkswagen settlement, what's happening with unused funds for that, because that's kind of a whole different beast. It's its own kind of entity and trust that was dedicated to the state. So I'm not quite sure about the Volkswagen funding if that doesn't get used. The Houston Galveston Clean Cities Coalition, yes, is a sister organization. Andrew DeCandis and Ben Finley are the Clean Cities coordinators for that. And so you guys can go to, and if you just Google search Clean Cities Coalitions, or just search the Houston Clean Cities, their information should pop up, and you guys can get their email, their website, and all that. And they should be able to connect with all the same information. We work with them regularly. And so have you put together any guides to EVs to people who are new to them for education purposes? Talking about basics of owning EVs, maybe even going to specifics of what EV might be best for a certain person or family. We haven't put together any specific guides for that on our own. The Department of Energy has a lot of different kind of EV 101 guides for people. And we provide as much basic info and links to that as much as possible. But we pretty much push people to those Department of Energy resources that they have. But yeah, they have basic guides for that.
Good.
And I've got a quick question about charging locations. I've heard a lot of conflicting stories about whether or not we can get or expect to see level 3 or DC fast chargers at like highway rest stops. Is that something that would be covered by this?
So that's actually a bigger issue. Technically right now, as it's written, rest stops cannot have any services as part of that. So it's technically illegal and not possible to have any charging stations at public rest stops, according to kind of just federal legislation with that. The way that they wrote it, the only thing that's available to be dispensed is a vending machine. And so that is something that we have noted as a huge opportunity. People go to rest areas, they sit there, if they can plug in. Most of these rest areas aren't really wired to handle that power. And so I know that that is something that has been brought up on the federal level to see if that's going to get changed, to see if they can start installing in that federal right of way. But that is not something possible at this point right now. Yeah.
Jason's a funny guy. He says, how do we reclassify DC fast chargers as vending machines?
Yeah, seriously.
So more verbal questions from folks. So do you also keep track of all of the national incentives? Because as we know, there's talk of rejiggering it so that manufacturers won't stop being qualified at 200,000.
Yeah, we keep track of the national ones as much as possible. I'm not super up to date with any sort of movement on removing that kind of manufacturer OEM kind of stop on that. I know that has been in discussion, but nothing's gone through yet. And so that would obviously be a huge game changer, because the most popular EVs are kind of being punished per se right now, just because they don't get that extra funds. But yeah, I know that there is discussions with that. And I know with the administration change, they are anticipating there's already been a lot of EV related news and directives with them, such as like trying to get EVs with the postal service vehicles and kind of electrifying just the federal fleet in general. And so knowing that they're already doing stuff like that, I think that with time, I think with the stimulus package, the next one, finally going through, they'll have more time to dedicate to these longer standing issues. But yeah, I have no doubt that this administration will put something in to increase this as well.
Okay. Any possibility that we might get special EV license plates such as what they have in Hawaii here in Texas?
I'm not sure, because we don't have any sort of like benefits on the road of HOV accessibility or toll stuff. I'm not sure. There's not been anything that I have heard about with that. But that might be something that the DMV might be looking into. But I'm not sure. No one's brought it up to me yet.
Okay. I see the question, could charging stations be installed at state parks?
Yeah, state parks are not federal right of way. So that would be an area. There are still some stations available at state parks that I know of. It's just getting that funding available for them to be able to implement that. But yes, state parks are allowed to have, depending on where it is. Obviously, it can't be just in the all around the state park. It'd have to be probably more so at the kind of lodges and visitor centers. But yeah, I wouldn't see any problem with the state parks. There's nothing legally against it.
Okay. And I forgot which slide, but a little ways back in the chat, Lisa Lou asked, are those prices for residential? I think it was your slide.
Those prices are not for residential. All those prices for the infrastructure were for public chargers. And so residential, like I said, like I am dealing mainly with kind of statewide stuff and regional stuff and cities. And so we don't work with too much of the personal home chargers, but a lot of the times utilities may give some incentives for that. And many times those charging stations at homes are much more affordable than those publicly available chargers, because you're not trying to move the conduit to places that are as hard because it's connected to your house.
A typical home installation for residential starts at around $500 to $600 for the equipment. And then it's a question of the cost of getting electricity to where you want to put that. I put mine in my garage, and I had to go all the way from one corner of the house around to the other side of the house. And including the cost of the charge point home unit, I spent about $1,800.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I mentioned before, that EV ready codes and EV ready buildings make a huge difference. And so that's something that we're working on right now to try to get moving within the next 6 months, within our region at least. And we are working with Houston, Clean Cities as well to be part of these conversations, but our region is leading it. And that's to try to get EV ready building codes kind of adopted by our region. So all the municipalities can adopt it and get that kind of fully vetted and set. And that would basically require different commercial and residential entities to be built EV ready. And so all that conduit would be there. And so like you said, like it costs you money to move and get that placement. But with all these new builds happening, basically with this EV ready codes, it would require them to have that already set in a certain location in your garage. So all that the cost would basically be would just be the actual equipment, which makes a big difference.
All right, so we're closing in on 7:30. Any last questions, comments from folks here?
So a lot earlier in the presentation, you mentioned home charging and workplace charging. There's kind of an in-between area, which is, people who live in apartments and whatnot, where they just have like street side parking, especially in downtown type areas. Is that something that you guys have been looking into as well? And how's that?
Yeah, and so the street parking, the street light parking and stuff, charging is definitely something we've looked into. For many people, LA is a great example of what they did when they did their LED retrofit from their conventional street lights into LED street lights. All the wiring for the street lights was made for these heavier, pulled, older, like hotter running bulbs. And so when they switched over to LED, they basically had this like extra amount of energy that they had available. And so they were able to put in charging infrastructure within all their light poles in the certain areas without having to do any sort of retrofits at all or pull in any more power. And so we've discussed that with a couple different regional entities because it is cheaper, because you basically are just placing it on a pole that already has that power, if that power is available. First step would just be contacting the municipality to see who owns the streetlights. Many times the utility owns the streetlights and the cities don't own it. And so that would be a utility discussion. And so that is something that is, especially for those urban corridors that don't have a lot of side parking, or they don't have the spacing on a sidewalk in order to put a large charging station. You can just kind of pop it on a street light to be in one of those really popular walkable areas where people are parallel parking. So yes, that is definitely a huge game changer for those urban areas that don't have like dedicated parking spaces.
Yeah, it would really be great when we get infrastructure just all over the place.
Yeah. Well, some people, there's a pilot study in Germany that they're doing inductive charging roadways. And so basically you just drive down the highway and your car gets charged up and you don't ever need to actually plug it in, which is amazing if that would happen. But I think we're a little farther down the line for that one.
Very good, very good. Okay, last opportunity for folks to ask questions. I see a couple of comments in the chat about great presentation. I agree with that, definitely. This has been really, really informative. Thank you so much, Bailey.
Yeah.
And keep up all the good work. I mean, we've got a lot of people here in Texas that are excited about EVs and yeah, infrastructure and laws and everything that affect us are important. So it's great.
Yeah, like I said before, all of our slides will be shared. Feel free to contact us with whatever. We would be happy to bridge a connection with Houston Clean Cities as well. They have all the same connections to all of the stuff that we work on through our coalition. So yeah, thank you guys for having me. We always love talking about it, and we hope that we can work together soon.
Bailey, I just want to say something that I asked Smitty over at TechCetera, and oh goodness, I just forgot her name.
Lori.
Stacy.
Oh,
I asked him, I said, who's good about talking about incentives? And immediately they sent me an email, said, Bailey, contact Bailey. So
no,
thank you so much.
We have to do it frequently.
You're the best in the state, I think. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we appreciate it. All right. Well, you guys have a good rest of your night, and thank you for having me.
Thank you again.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so that was super. That was a good first half. And Ken Jones, I saw that you've joined us and you had a question that I think we want to use in part for the second half, and particularly some of our members here like Fred Anders and Chris Hayden, I think will tap to help answer. So Ken, if you are there, do you want to repeat your question yourself?
Yeah. What I was concerned with is a recent power outage here, and then the question of coming up with a battery backup for air conditioners and or at least refrigerators, as opposed to having to deal with a generator. And I'm wondering if there's any thought with regard to using other than lead acid batteries. It seems to me that the NiCad batteries that you'd have in the Prius would have some potential, but I'm wondering if anybody's done anything like that, or if our battery backup systems that are associated with the various solar panel vendors would have any information about how to handle supplying power when our power grid goes out like it did. So that's the basis for the question.
Great. And I hope that you had only mild problems like the rest of us during that cold spell, that you didn't suffer any broken hearts or things like that. But I think I'd first, if you're available, Chris Hayden, like to turn to you, because I know that you've got some professional experience in this area.
Sure. In the car, so I apologize if there's any background noise. So yeah, there are a lot of options on the market. It really depends on the type of solar system that either you have or that you're looking at. If you have an existing solar system, if it's anything besides a microinverter, that only subtracts one choice. You're not going to consider the N-phase system, which is a lithium iron phosphate. Everything else is essentially a lithium ion option. Let's see, if you've got a string system or a power optimizer inverter system, you're looking at options from Tesla. You're looking at options from Panasonic Evervolt. You're looking at options from Sonnen from Germany. Those are actually manufactured here in Georgia and Virginia. And then you're looking at also choices from Hanwha Q-Cell's Q Home system. And just had a call today. SolarEdge is working on another iteration of their own, rather than they're currently, if you look at their marketing, they're currently tying their inverter, their new inverter energy management system, to LG's battery systems. But LG seems to be having some issues with theirs, even though they're relaunching their system once more. It looks like SolarEdge is finally bringing on board their battery acquisition from a few years ago. And so, yeah, there are tons of solutions out there. Prices vary. Right now, the low cost price leader is Tesla for the time being. That starts with one battery, which would be 13.5 usable kWh of capacity. And you're probably looking at roughly a gross price of about $12,000. Biggest reason, you'll find that the first system size, I don't know how best to put it. If you're looking at a partial home backup, meaning you're not looking to cover everything, and that might, in most cases, that probably means not including an HVAC system. A partial load system is going to require by code the inclusion of a backup panel. In other words, you're going to have to put in a panel next to your existing breaker panel. You'll have to put one just for those loads that are being backed up.
Yeah.
And so, but if you look at full home backup, or typically if you bring in, let me think of it. So here's a good example. If you're looking at the Tesla Powerwall system at 13.5 for almost every house out there is going to be a partial backup. But if you're looking at 2 or more, it's quite possible that you might be able to service most, if not all, of the panel with, 2 batteries, and thus you can forego the need for that secondary backup load panel, because they can take care of all of it. Not always, and there are lots of details. Each one's has its own peculiarities. We're more than welcome to answer any questions that you have about that. But the neat thing about it is that the batteries avoid the need for any kind of fuel source outside of solar, right? So you take care of the noxious fumes, you take care of the annoying noise. Beyond that, you get to apply whatever investment tax credit is in place, as long as it's being used in conjunction with solar. I don't see a point to do it without that, but there are those. Frankly, you wouldn't be able to use the investment tax credit if you didn't.
The solar could be of any different size, so you might have on the smaller scale solar, because the batteries.
Correct. Yeah, in fact, in-phase starts, if you've got a microinverter system, in-phase gives you options beginning at 3.3 kilowatts. So, and then you can ladder up in increments of 3.3. So,
And with the investment tax credit, what percentage of the investment tax credit you can take depends on what percentage of the battery charging is through solar. So if your solar system is large enough that you can charge the entire battery system, then you can get the entire investment tax credit.
Well, good.
yeah, and if the Green Deal passes, well, that's going to go up to 30% again. So right now it's 26%.
Thinking of this last storm, we were out for about 40 hours, but during that period, there was really very little sun and likely very little charging available. So a 13.5 wall, one of the Tesla battery walls, how long would you would expect it to last in terms of a draw of in the order of 5,000 watts? So what kind of capacity or duration can we expect out of a deal like that?
At 5, you're using 5 kW?
Yeah.
Over what period of time?
Well, over, we're looking at the
5 kW in a day?
Yeah.
Or per hour?
Well, it would be usually, if you're looking at refrigerator, really, and heating, you would be looking at service for intermittent service for just a couple of hours a day. But how many hours of service can you get out of that battery wall?
So you could get 13.5 kilowatt hours out of that battery.
So
And
I think
it
to answer
discharges-
the question, it might be valuable for the gentleman to look at the power usage that you have on a whole house basis,
It
and
would.
you can do that by logging in if you don't already have it, and some of us probably do, an account or a registration at Smart Meter Texas. Smart
Perfect.
Meter Texas, and there you can get 2 years of 15-minute power usage data. And you can get a really good understanding of what your whole house usage is over a 24 or a 48-hour period. And using that, you can make some decisions on what kind of battery storage or standby generation capacity you might need in order to support the whole house today. And understand that all of the commercial vendors, whether it's solar or gas generators or anything else, have the ability to, or the technology, the technique and the expertise to install load shedding contactors inside your existing breaker box. So that while you might install something that is intended to be used to allow you to activate any circuit, it doesn't mean that you are simultaneously going to activate every circuit.
Right.
What a lot of those things will do is they will de-energize the heavy use items like an electric stove or an air conditioner or compressor, or those things that would dominate the total energy usage. Things like lights and televisions and refrigerators really don't take a lot of power. And so, you know, in an event like what we had last week or 2 weeks ago, the energy that it takes to run the furnace and the air handler, and the energy that it takes to run the air conditioner, not the air conditioner, the refrigerator, is really quite modest. And I think that people might find that 13 kilowatt hours is more than enough to handle a lot of those modest loads. For myself, as I look at that data, on the heaviest days, the hottest days, the heaviest usage days of August, my home uses around 45 kilowatt hours of energy. And so if I were going to size a battery, I would look for something that could handle, something on the order of 1 to 2 times that number. So 13 kilowatt hours is obviously not going to work very long if I'm using 45 kilowatt hours per day.
Right.
But take into account when you're using those hours.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So, is it generation time or is it post generation?
Right. And so, one of the things that is an area of interest to me is to look at things like what would it take for me to be able to use a small generator in conjunction with a battery, and whether that's a stationary battery or some kind of temporary connection to a mobile battery or some other battery storage mechanism, and a small generator with enough capacity to deliver the daily storage needs during, say, the daylight hours, so that I didn't have to run the generator at night. Personally, that's something I'd like to be able to do. I like quiet. I'm sure my neighbors would like to have quiet.
Right.
And if you look at your energy usage, I expect that what you'll find is that if you take that usage, in my case, I said 40 something kilowatt hours per day, you divide that over 12 or 24 hours, and that's not really a very big generator. A 35 kilowatt generator is more than adequate for my needs if I wanted to run it for, say, 12 hours a day. As long as I have battery storage to handle, to accumulate what I need to run during the off hours, and as long as I have enough peak capacity to run those heavy loads during the intermittent portions of the day that I want to run them, in addition to charging the battery in preparation for the overnight period. But the need for something like a 20 kilowatt whole house battery, or probably whole house generator, is, I don't think, as certain as people might think. I think that you could make do with a much smaller generator if you wanted to go that route. Cost is a different thing. Generators are not very expensive, but battery systems are at this point.
Oh, a question for you, Ken Jones. Is your house heating natural gas, so that's just a fan that's electric, or is your heating itself electric?
No, it's natural gas heating, so not a problem that way.
Right, that would make a big difference in
no
what,
joke.
Yeah, what kind of power you would need in case of another cold spell. Yeah.
In the case of the whether it's the air handler for your home furnace and your home airflow system, or your, even in the summertime, your air conditioning compressor, a soft start kit is probably an essential component of one of these systems. Otherwise, you're looking at an enormous surge current just to start even the most simple induction motor, right?
Yeah, you want to look at both your energy and your power when you're considering it, right?
Yeah, so a soft start kit would apply for the summertime, and that's what I was just going to say.
Well, not just the summertime, but even for the wintertime. I had the personal experience of trying to run my furnace off of the various half a dozen UPS systems that I had, and I know my furnace, my air handler, only needs 4 amps, a little bit less than 4 amps to run. But it needs a lot more than, exactly. The locked rotor amperage is much, much higher than that. And so I didn't have enough surge capacity to start the furnace. Right. Even though I could
have 4 to 5 times.
Right. So a soft start kit, not only on the air conditioner compressor, but also on the furnace or the air handler, is an important component of them.
Because Peggy is gonna come in.
So is that with that surge impact soft start for the is that for the fan in the air handler, or the actual furnace portion?
That was the surprise to me. Yes, you need a soft start kit on the fan and the air handler. Or you need the ability to handle a 12 to 20 amp locked rotor amperage, right? That LRA is the number that you're after.
I was heat generating for her.
All right, going to the batteries themselves, anything other than the Tesla battery wall does anything other than the Tesla battery wall come to mind? As in, lithium batteries are great for their lightweightness, but I don't need lightweight in my garage.
Right. If they're a stationary battery, you're not really concerned about that, and still lead is a viable option. Yeah. There are other vendors. Right. I mean, the ABB, which has been building big electric systems for a very long time, has a complete system. Schneider Electric has a complete system. Guardian has a system that they are positioning as a competitor to Tesla. And they have the same modular idea where you can start small and grow big. And they have a small system that is smaller than a single unit Tesla, and a larger system that is bigger than the largest Tesla. And that's what you need is really probably the first question that you need to answer. And for that, again, I would suggest strongly that you go comb through the data that you can get out of Smart Meter Texas to get a really good understanding of what is your daily usage and what is your peak usage. And then approach one of these vendors, either a systems integrator or somebody like, Generator Superstore up in Tomball. It will handles the Generac line. They certainly have a solution, right? In addition to Tesla. Tesla is a Cadillac. Tesla is certainly gold plated, and that's one that's very appealing. I'd love to get it, but as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, there's a long lead time right now on getting a Tesla system.
Yeah, so that question in the chat, are the power walls still back ordered? Does anyone know?
So my experience a couple of weeks ago was yes. But who was that? Go ahead.
It depends on the distributor. There are certain distributors that Tesla is moving into a distributor business model in their solar business, and so those who buy all of the components from their inverters to their Hanwha panels to their racking system move up the line in their ability to get power walls. Plus, if you sell solar roofs, you move up the line. So yeah, there are those that have them, but the majority of those who 6 months ago said that they were certified Tesla installers, they've gone to the bottom of the list. So yeah, it's going to be a high distributor for Tesla products that covers the whole gamut of products. And because they are now outsourcing the installation of the roofs. So if you could find one of those dealers, they will most definitely have access to Powerwalls. Otherwise, your best bet is to go directly to Tesla for Powerwall.
Okay, good to know, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I am most interested in trying to move away from the lithium batteries back to something less expensive and heavier, but it doesn't sound like that's really in the.
Do you have a solar system yet?
No.
Okay. Then I would encourage you to look at a microinverter system. In-Phase's system is lithium iron, and so it is heavier, but it takes out the cobalt from the equation.
Yeah.
So much more stable, right? Not that the power walls or any of the other systems are going to catch on fire anytime soon, but it is a heavier, more stable system. Plus, one of the things that I've learned over the last couple months that makes a huge difference between Enphase's system and anything else out there is their knowledge of microinverters and how they can use the microinverter. Everything else is using a power optimizer or just simply string. The fact that they have a microinverter and they're using their next generation microinverter technology in the battery system. I'll just use Tesla as an example. Let's say you're in the middle of the day and your solar system is generating and the grid goes down. If your batteries are at full capacity, as if you're in the middle of the day, the likelihood is they've already filled up to capacity. With a Tesla system, if the grid goes down and you're generating solar, it's actually going to turn off your solar generation capability.
Right.
And it's going to immediately start dumping from the battery only, and until it reaches 75% capacity, at which point it will then turn your solar system back on and start filling up the battery as long as there's excess above and beyond what you're currently generating. And that holds true for every other commercial system that I'm aware of. The only difference is with the Enphase system, they use their microinverter technology. So in the same scenario, rather than turning off the generation, the microinverters can actually be, for lack of a better word, dimmed down. They can shed generation.
Okay.
And that's instantaneous. So the system will actually match your generation to your current consumption need. And hopefully that is avoiding the need for the batteries, right? And so you can store the batteries longer and use them only when you need them, when there is no generation. And that system actually ends up, because of that characteristic, you can probably get away with a slightly smaller system, battery storage wise, because you have that ability to do the generation islanding, as it were.
Gotcha.
And
So,
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 and
so,
oh, go ahead.
Chris, I have a question. I have a question for you with that battery technology.
Uh-huh.
Because I actually just decided that I'm going with the N-phase. I have N-phase microinverters on my panels upstairs.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So the question is where to put the batteries. I have a choice
well.
between a shaded alley between my house and the neighbor's house that gets maybe 3.5 hours of direct sunlight during the day.
Okay.
And then a enclosed garage that's not really conditioned, that's got a fairly leaky door. So it's probably not much difference outside than ambient.
Right. Okay. So right now, Tesla and Enphase are the only two that claim to be, either they can be outside or inside. Everybody else wants to be inside. And so the heat variance, or the temperature difference, is a little bit greater for the Enphase, probably simply because it doesn't have the cobalt. There are no mechanical cooling devices needed for the Enphase system like there are for the Powerwall. Powerwall is a lot like a desktop PC in that it's got that cooling fan on the side once it hits a certain temperature. So there is that point of, the potential point of failure. But with the Enphase system, without the cobalt, you don't have quite the concern about the runaway heat. And so, the range, I think that gives it an additional, I want to say about 5 degrees. I'd have to cheat and look at a spec sheet, but I'm more than happy to, you can probably find it online, or I can send it to you if you want to, put your email in the chat.
I've got the spec sheet for the battery.
Oh, well then, yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Chris, I was
probably,
gonna ask, Chris, if
Yeah.
you put your contact info in the chat. if you
Oh,
don't
sure.
mind.
Yeah.
But keep going. I just didn't want that to get lost.
Yeah, no, your ambient temperature in the garage in the summer could probably get up to what, 120 safely?
I would say that my ambient temperature in the garage in the summer equals the outside ambient temperature, maybe a smidge higher.
Well, that's not bad then. That can't be, 120 is a easy operation temperature for both the Powerwall and the InCharge systems. So I would prefer putting it indoors if the room was there, simply to avoid the cold temperatures. Both Powerwall and InCharge could operate comfortably up to 0. But anything below that, you'd want to have it inside if you want to keep it at optimum operating. It's not that it can't operate below that, but those are your optimum ranges: 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And 4 below.
Yeah, I think the N-phase's optimum range, I think, was 20 to 90, and then it degrades above 90 and below 20
Celsius. Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about 19 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the spec sheet before I
Okay.
and I'll come back.
Okay.
So again, the easy rule of thumb is that batteries like the same temperature as you do. They don't want to be at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. They don't want to be at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And at either of those extremes, the performance is degraded. And in particular, charge current needs to be managed but at low temperatures. You can't charge at 1C or 2C at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. You need to have a system that will tailor or trim the charge current in those cases.
Battery
Is
management
there
systems usually do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Seth, any chance at all that you could have your batteries indoors and then they wouldn't have the outdoor temperature swings?
The problem with indoors is I probably have to run another 100-foot buried wire around the perimeter of the house like I did for the EV charger.
Okay, well, if it's the life of batteries, which are expensive versus one-time
Yeah.
costs, that's something to weigh.
So on the N-Charge 10 specs, it says ambient operating temperature range -15°C to 55°C, optimum range 0°C to 30°C.
Optimum is, okay,
So I wanna-
32.
I'm sorry. I want to, Dave, when there's a chance, I want to give an alternate answer to Kenneth Jones' question about what options do we have.
Okay, we want to cover that. I'd also got an offer from Jim Thompson to give us his experience from this cold snap. And while it's relatively fresh in folks' minds, Jim, if you're able in 10 minutes to tell us what happened as you saw it, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'd be happy to do that. I didn't prepare anything, but I did live through the freeze here in Houston. And what I have is a 10.72 rooftop photovoltaic system. And I've got 3 Tesla Powerwalls in my garage. They're indoors, but they're in the garage, unheated, unair conditioned. So that's a total of a little over 40 kilowatt hours of battery backup. Typically what I use in my house, varies by season, but 40 kilowatts would be a good heavy day of usage. And then of course, if the sun is shining, that'll carry me through pretty well. Today was a beautiful day. I made almost 60 kilowatt hours from the panels. And I used about 10% of that and sold the rest into the grid. But during the ice storm, we had kind of a tricky situation here. My daughter lives in town. She has a family of 5, and they came over because we had power from the battery, and nobody else did at that time. I think this was Monday. Yeah, my power went down Monday morning about 1:30 a.m. Now the batteries eventually got lower and lower in charge, and the sun was keeping them somewhat charged up. But one thing I don't think it was said earlier that everyone needs to know is that the solar system needs to have a little bit of power from either the grid or the batteries to power the inverters.
Right.
And that's a key thing. So if the grid goes down, you can use your battery. You don't have to do anything. Automatically, your battery will power the inverters and keep your solar going. But if your battery's totally discharged, as I said, that's about a day of my usage, depending on the day. Could be several days or half a day. But anyway, about a day. Then where are you? Your solar system essentially shuts down because there's no juice going to the inverters to power up the panels. So I had that system. In addition, in my backyard, I have a utility pole. It's a lovely site, and there are 3 transformers on it. And one of the circuit breakers on top of one of the transformers, boom, blew during the power outage. So now I had no access to grid power. When the rest of my neighborhood came back intermittently, off and on, I had no grid power to get my inverters to run, to make my PVs power up and charge my battery and run my house. So as a result, I actually ran out of battery power about 4 p.m. on Monday. So fortunately, I have a house with a gas fireplace. I have gas powered heater, but it requires an electric fan, so I had no heat. And I have a natural gas powered range or stovetop in my kitchen, so I still could boil water and cook food. But I had no power coming to the solar inverters to get the panels to run and recharge up the battery, which was at 0. Actually, the battery was indicating 5%. And I had, from previous research on the Tesla site, found that the battery will cut off when it's out of juice, and then for 5 minutes every hour, it will try to restart the inverters. So when the battery was down, when the battery cut out, it had 5%, and exactly on the hour, it's tried to restart the inverters, and for some reason they wouldn't start. I don't know why. And then an hour later, it tried again, and an hour later, it tried again, and each one of these attempts consumed about 1.5% of the battery. And then after all 3 attempts, I was showing no juice left at all in the battery to restart the solar, and I had no grid available, because even though my neighborhood was going up and down on a grid, I at my home had no grid because of the blown transformer circuit breaker. I had a long phone call with Tesla battery support, and they were very helpful, and they told me about the secret reset switch. There is a switch inside one of the gray panels on the back side of my garage, external. There's this oval shaped diagonal switch that was unlabeled. But the woman told me if you push that upwards on the diagonal, it'll take the little bit of juice, even though your battery is showing 0, take a little bit of juice from your battery and try and restart your inverters. And that worked. So that got me back in business. And the panels fired up and the battery started charging and my home was powered and all was good. But it was a little touch and go there for about 20 hours or so while all this was being worked out. One detail I left out is when the battery tried to restart the solar for those 3 times, 5 minutes on the hour, it was dark out. So even though it was trying to start the solar, there was no sun to keep it going.
Right.
So that, in a nutshell, was a learning experience. Overall, I was happy with it. Another detail is I have a swimming pool, and the swimming pool was installed about 12, 15 years ago. And in that time and going forward, pools were equipped with an automatic temperature detector that powered the pool on to prevent it from freezing. Now, the body of water is not going to freeze, but what you're really concerned about is all the piping, the PVC piping between the heater and the pumps and the filters and into and out of the pool. So, and also when the pool detects a low temperature, and mine appears to be set at like below 40. So at 39 degrees, the pool comes on, all the pumps are initiated, and all the lighting in the pool is started up. And in case you don't know, the main light in the pool is 500 watts.
Wow.
And it's a big one. And I thought about getting an LED replacement, but it was too expensive. And then there's a light in the spa or hot tub, and that's another couple of 100 watts. Plus the pumps are a few 100 watts. So all of a sudden, when it got really cold that first night, down to 18 degrees here, my battery's being very rapidly drawn down by the automatic system in the pool. That was good because it was preventing the pool equipment from freezing, but it drew down the battery in a very strong manner. During the day, when the temperatures got up to like 36, 38, I did a hard offset on the pool system. So it wasn't going at all, which really saved me a lot of juice and extended my battery system. But again, another learning, another lesson learned there.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. So questions for Jim regarding his system, his experience? How long until they got that circuit breaker on the pole fixed?
Yeah, some great video footage of that too. But it took them about 2 days. They did it at night. It was pitch dark. I think they finished about 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, a couple of days later.
Okay. Just thinking that there's probably a lot of demand for those types of services all around the area.
Yes, the irony is during the initial blackout or power outage in my neighborhood, I was the only one that had juice, and I was able to host some friends, and it was all was good. Then when the neighborhood came back up, but my battery was drained and I couldn't restart my system, even though the grid was working for the most of the neighborhood due to that blown circuit breaker on the transformer, I couldn't restart my solar. So things were switched and I was the only one without power.
Yeah, that's something. Okay.
There you have it.
Hey, Jim, would you please take a picture and show us where that switch is and send it to Dave so Dave can have it on hand?
Yeah, I did take that picture and I'll send it in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Weird, because it's totally unlabeled. I would have had no idea what that switch did.
Yeah, it seems like there should be a way to manually force it. It's good it tries once every hour. Kind of strange, I would think would have a clock in it, why it's trying at night, but
Right.
okay. It just in case the clock would be off, I mean, the belt and suspenders would be have it try every hour around the clock. But if it really draws like 1.5% out of the batteries every time it tries, if your timing were bad at sunset and it was going to try every hour again up through dawn, I mean, it would take even a somewhat charged battery all the way down to zero, but okay.
I agree. That's absolutely true. And the other learning was zero is not necessarily zero. So even when we're showing zero, you could jump it.
Right, right. Yeah, I would kind of hope they would put some kind of a safety buffer in there and not,
Right.
it's one thing to indicate zero, it's another to engineer it to literally go down to zero. So,
Right.
okay, thanks. That's great on that. Chris Hayden, if you're still available, I kind of wanted to ask because it ties in a bit to this. Why is the algorithm such that 75%, the battery has to be down to 75% before the solar will actually contribute to running a house when the grid is off?
It's a good question. One that I'd have to ask the help desk if they can answer it. Yeah,
'Cause I could see it being down a little bit, say 98% or something, just because, I mean, just like a lot of cars that have regen, if the battery's full, you can't put power
put more
generation
in, right?
in it.
Yeah.
Right, so I could see being down a little bit, just would make sense, but 75% is quite a bit down, and in the case of a multi-day,
No, it
grid-
didn't. No. It needs 20. It would, no, I'm sorry. No, it's 25% down. Sorry, 75% capacity.
down, so
Yeah.
75% remaining. Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't say it. I just remembered the 75 number, but until it's 75% down,
Yeah.
that, to me, that algorithm needs a little bit of explaining, because 98% I'd be happy with, but yeah, because in the case like what we all here experience in Texas, a multi-day outage, which the weather is predicted to be cold for multiple days, and so once the outage has started, at least in my mind, I kind of figured, well, it's going to run through the duration of this cold weather. I mean,
Right.
they're not
Yeah.
magically going to get, ice off of natural gas pipeline wellheads and things like that in the middle of this, even if they take their little blow torches to them or something. But and then, of course, the politics of when they're incentivized to generate power versus when they'd like to leave the rate at $9,000 is another whole political question of incentive. We have no capacity market here in Texas. Okay, Jim and Chris, those are all good things.
I had a quick question, related question. Hey, Jim and I were actually texting each other during his experience. So it was really helpful to get that information from Jim. But Jim, you sent a really quick video showing the Powerwall software. It looked like it was indicating that the PV was supplying power both to your home as well as trying to charge the battery. But it sounded like from what Chris was saying, that doesn't, the Powerwall system doesn't work that way. That Enphase is the only battery system that will allow you to do that, power the house as well as charge the battery at the same time. Am I understanding that?
Well, he probably had enough capacity in the battery at that point so that it could do both. Because
Yeah, I guess so. I was able to charge the battery while powering the house.
you weren't able to charge the battery, which means that you
No, no. I was.
Oh yeah, okay. That means that you were using less than. So how many do you have? You have 3. So you were generating over probably 10 or 15, because it can both discharge and charge per unit at a maximum rate of 5 kWh. So
Right. I have a 10.7 solar system, which usually maxes
Okay.
out at about 8 on a good day.
okay, so yeah, then you were just you were able to consume less than what you were producing, and so the excess was going in. Yeah. So yeah, I'm trying to think of a couple of stats. 7.6 solar, 7.6 kW per power wall, and at a rate of, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud. So, yeah, no, that's what you were saying. It was that he was able to store it because he had capacity in his battery at that time.
So Chris, I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on what you expect the behavior to be when there is competition for charging the battery and running the loads of the home that exceeds the total capacity of the PV system. What should or what does happen in your experience?
So in an outage, if consumption exceeds generation, then it would draw off battery.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No,
If the total sum of charging the battery, if the battery is low, and running the loads on the house consumption exceeds the available capacity at peak power of the PV system at that moment, does your system or do other systems balance the load to prioritize the house loads, or to reserve some portion to charge the battery? If the battery is really low, you may want to prioritize that. Is there some thought into how to allocate scarce PV charging capacity when PV production capacity when charging needs and current loads exceed that capacity?
Sure. So you're going to want to start shedding loads. You can do it the old-fashioned way, and simply start turning off components and watch in real time on your battery monitoring system. Does that increase your input rate to the battery?
So a user could do that, and a homeowner could do that, but that's not something that you've seen built into any of these systems. In the scenario that was described a few minutes ago, where the battery charge is drained down to near zero, that's a high priority load. We need to get that up, even if it means that we can't run the television, right?
Right. The best that I've seen is a third component, which is to use a smart panel. And I think the two best that I've seen thus far are Span, or Span.io as they like to call it, Span.io, and Lumen, Lumin. Siemens also has one, and I'm trying to think of the fourth one. You'd recognize it if you I don't know if you're familiar with the breakers.
So are you aware if any of those have some notion of prioritizing? If the battery is at 5%, I really want to charge the battery. But if the battery is at 80%, I can run the TV.
Yeah, both of those products are retrofittable to existing control panels, and they can also be included in the ITC if you're upgrading. If you're putting in batteries and in conjunction with solar.
And Chris, the Enphase system, and part of the reason why I decided to go with the Enphase system is it has a smart panel and it's got that type of programmable feature.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that's the only one thus far that has it on.
Sorry, Chris. Just a quick response to Ken. In the Tesla system that I have, the solar panels will prioritize the house load, and I have full house backup. I haven't selected certain circuits to back up or not. If the solar is producing more than the house needs, it will then shunt over to the battery. When the battery's full, it will then sell back into the grid system.
Gotcha, but there's no notion of stashing charge in the battery at the expense of some of the house loads.
Not really, unless you want to manually turn off your pool, your air conditioner.
Right. So it's up to you to shed some load so that there is capacity available to charge the battery.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. If Kevin, Douglas, if you want to bring up the item you wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, what we had happen 2 weeks ago was, you know, a once in a lifetime event, right?
Well, no, it was a once in a decade event, right? The same thing
Not
happened
the
in
length.
very recent memory.
Not the length, not the length, not the length. So I'm the drop in temperature and the amount of time that the temperature stayed down was not a once in a decade. We've had temperatures drop. But what I'm going to say is there's a difference between an extremely cold event and a power loss during the summer. Those are two events where you have different loads. One is where you have air conditioning loads, and the other one you don't. One of the things that I'm waiting for as an electric vehicle owner is vehicle to home and vehicle to grid, so that you can use the.
So that's, Kevin, that's actually what I was talking about at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe it was just before you joined. There are at least 2 commercial vendors of vehicle to home that'll utilize the CHAdeMO protocol for doing that. That have you can get a 3 or 6 kilowatt CHAdeMO to AC out vehicle to home interface. Now, what I haven't seen is something that would AC couple with your home power system, whether it's generators or battery or photovoltaic or some combination. But there are a couple of commercial products that will plug into your EV using the high power DC and produce a multi-kilowatt AC output, and that you can buy today. And that's something I just found out about a couple of days ago. It's very exciting to me because previously it just wasn't possible, right? But
So
there is.
Who are they?
I'll send Dee the links and we can get those things posted.
Okay, that'd be great, because I know that Wallbox has one, but it's only available in Europe, and it is using the CHAdeMO. One thing that I do, of course, it wouldn't have really done very much on an event like we had. I mean, if you go into camping mode and you know it's going to be below freezing outside, you take everything out of the refrigerator, you put it outside in the winter. In some kind of.
We did that. We definitely benefited from outside refrigeration capacity.
If you're in the summertime, you have to run the refrigerator. So what I've done during a hurricane is I have a 2 kilowatt sine wave inverter. I hook it up to the leaf on the 12 volt side of the car. I clip it onto the 12 volt battery.
So that's one of the things people don't know about the Leaf, is that it has a tremendously oversized DC-DC converter. It's more than adequate for a substantial load. So I'd heard 1.5, but you're saying you ran a 2 kilowatt load off the DC-DC?
No, I have a 2 kilowatt inverter, and I run the refrigerator, the modem, a fan, and a light, and I can plug in other devices, maybe the television. But if you have your refrigerator going in the summertime and you have a modem and your computer, then your quality of life goes up a little bit. So, I mean, there are ways, Ken, and I don't know, Ken Jones, I don't know what we have a member of our group, Mark, what's Mark's last name? He's been at some of our meetings. He actually has a piece of property where he has solar, and he's used some bidirectional inverters to power his property, and he's always been interested in figuring out how to use his Leaf. He has a Leaf in association with that. But anyways, I don't know how powerful the DC to DC on the Prius is, but you might be able to use that to power very small loads. Of course, in a winter, very deep temperature event like this, you're talking about other issues. You almost have to, if you can't have heat and you're running into the danger of freezing pipes, maybe the thing to do is keep them all dripping and and open them all up so that they flow and do something with the stuff in the refrigerator outside, and then use something to power a heater, for example. But I just wanted to add, Dave, the idea of having the vehicles, with all this stored energy in the vehicles, to power components of your home. And so I'm looking forward to seeing who's making these inverters that you can use through a CHAdeMO system.
Oh, that's really good to get that out for everybody. Okay.
Yeah, Nissan, aren't they doing that still in France? Aren't they testing that out? And I thought BMW would run a trial effort with Pacific Edison.
Yeah, so Nissan has been kicking this around for a while. One of the commercial vendors is called EV Siphon, EVSIPHON. And let's see if I can find what was the other one here. Yeah, I'm not finding the other one. That I think EV Siphon has a 3 and 6 kilowatt CHAdeMO in, AC out inverter, and that is more than enough, especially if you have the ability to AC couple to your battery management system to run your key loads, your priority loads, like your refrigerator and your internet connection and your computer for quite a while, right? I mean, the Leaf battery is on the order of, what is it now, 40, 60 kilowatt hours? A Tesla is substantially larger than that. You can run 10 kilowatt hours per day for a long time on those batteries.
Right.
Okay. So
yeah, that's really what I was thinking about in the first place. I don't want to go back to lead acid, and I don't want to go to Tesla's battery, but the Leaf battery was really one of the things I was hoping somebody would say something about.
So somebody has done that. I mean, there's two solutions. Kevin described one, the DC-DC converter that converts the traction battery voltage down to 12 volts is oversized on a Leaf. And so if you have a 1,000 watt inverter, which you can go buy at Fry's, if you can still find a Fry's that's open, right? If you have a 1,000 watt inverter, you can clamp that onto the 12 volt circuit of a Leaf and get your 120 volt output to run a few critical loads. And the Leaf can run a kilowatt indefinitely until the battery drains, right? The next higher power output is to run the CHAdeMO connection with the reverse direction, where you have from the vehicle to the home, V2H, and that you can get in either 3 or 6 kilowatt configurations, and then your Leaf looks like a genset, and you can run very substantial loads. Yeah, but the simplest thing is probably what Kevin described, to hook into the 12 volt system of the Leaf and leverage the Leaf's traction to 12 volt DC-DC converter to then power your inverter. I mean, you're going to lose something in the conversion at each step, but you've got a lot of energy stored in a Leaf, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy in these car batteries. I've told a few people. My son and I, just two of us, happened to be here during that cold spell, and the house had been off for 18 hours, and it was getting close to bedtime, and we were, wondering how much longer it was going to last, and so he and I went into the garage, and the only car in there is an electric car, and so we turned on the seat heaters and the little bit of cabin heat, and took our blankets with us. We were ready. We reclined the seats. We were ready to.
Well, I think that's a lot. There's a lot of value there. You don't have to heat the entire house. You don't even have to heat the entire car. You just have to heat the occupants, right? And,
right, exactly. So we were all set to spend the night in the car. And then around 10 p.m., the power came back on again at the house. We ended up going back into the house and getting under blankets. The house had gotten down to 52 degrees. But if we needed to, we could have jumped back into the car again.
We didn't get quite that far. At our place, the kitchen held at about 60, but that's because we had a big pot of water on for coffee and tea. The kind of the back corners of the house probably dropped down into the 50s, but we had a room where we could go and just put on a sweater and be comfortable.
That's good. Your stove was gas. Our stove happens to be electric.
The best that I've seen is something from Gen Air that has 2 of each. You have 2 electric burners for things like the spaghetti pot, and 2 gas burners for that high precision skillet dish that you have in mind.
Okay, well, I haven't seen one that has some of each. That's an interesting thought. But,
I ended up using my car's 12 volt to jumpstart my gas heater because it's got an electric pilot.
Okay. So I did. A couple of years ago, we went to a tankless water heater for the house, and there is a small UPS. It's a little bitty one. It's like 450 volt amps that we have running that, because if the power goes out, we no longer have hot water, and all it takes is a less than an amp to run the thing. Right. But if you don't have
a gas powered on-demand hot water.
Exactly. It's a gas powered tankless water heater. And unless you have around 70 watts of power, it's going to be cold.
Okay. Because our tankless is electric. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Both kinds of those exist. So all right. Well, we've gotten to 8:30. I mean, if there's something someone's dying to say right now, we can include that. Actually, there was a little 14-minute video that I wanted to see. So yesterday I took part in the Central Jersey Electric Auto Association meeting, and they clued me in on this really funny but very informative video. So what I'll say is that we can end the official meeting, but I'll let the recording continue, and I will screen share and I will run it. The video has the voice of Robert Llewellyn, who folks may know from videos he's done on YouTube and called Fully Charged. And the title, I believe, is something like Gas Troll. And it's really informative. What the petroleum industry doesn't advertise is how much CO2 and other kinds of pollution are created, and how much electrical energy it takes to do everything that they do, from running pump jacks and drawing oil out of the ground electrically to a lot of the other things. And so I will, as I say, if someone wants to make a comment right now, I see Jason put in the chat the evextend.com, which is a site, I believe I've heard that one before. I've looked at it in the past, which has to do with tapping into a 12-volt car battery system to get useful power out of a car when the grid is down and you've got maybe a refrigerator to run or something like that. So I see Colin's written down that the Tesla 12-volt lighter only has like 140 watts. So that's not very much you can pull out of that. If someone else has got a comment that they really want right now, please. Yes.
The one thing that hasn't been mentioned is Prius. It certainly has the ability to become a wonderful generator. And there's been articles, I think, that have been published on how to make use of the Prius's great ability to generate power. It's a little bit more involved than certainly the Leaf's arrangement, but you've got a gasoline generator there that is of great use. But and there's been other articles on that too. So anyway,
there's a Ford F-150 with a power. It's a hybrid.
Yeah.
That has it's an expensive truck. I think it's in the $70,000 ballpark. And it has, there were several stories about people running all kinds of power off of that. And it made, I think it could power a refrigerator, it could power pretty large loads.
Yeah. So that's one that I also was looking into. Yeah, imagine that, looking into generator solutions. Yeah, that's their 6-cylinder hybrid is got a 7 kilowatt output, or 7 point something kilowatt output, which is a big genset, right? You can run a job site off of that. But they also have another solution that is not based on the hybrid vehicle, but it's based on their traditional drivetrain that has a smaller genset built into it. And I don't know the price of it, but I would hope that it's less than the 70K. I've got an 8-year-old F-150 in the driveway that I would love to upgrade if it meant that I had a generator that I could drive to the gas station, as opposed to a generator that I had to fill up with a big heavy gas can. Right.
All righty. Well, thanks for all the inputs, everyone, verbally and in the chat. And so I will go ahead and share my screen here now. And that way folks can see the video here.
Great meeting, Dave. Another good one.
All right, glad you enjoyed. All right, here comes, if I can get to the, I'm on the wrong window at the moment here. Where did it go? There it is, okay.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you
Some
want to
ads here
write
first,
essays
yeah.
that inspire.
Hello and welcome to a slightly unusual episode of Fully Charged, but I think really, really interesting. So last year I was contacted by a lovely chap called Mark Linthicum, who lives in the United States of America, about an animation project he was working on. It was to do with electric cars. And I was intrigued. So when I saw the rough version of that, I just thought it was brilliant. He asked me to do a voiceover for it, which I was very willing to do. Then it went through many different iterations. Finally, it's ready to be released. And we're very proud to host it on the Fully Charged show. Now, Mark did all the research for this. He wrote the script, he developed the animation, he did everything. My involvement was super minimal. I just recorded the voiceover. But I do think he's done a really, really good job. Now, this is an open source project. That means that anyone can post it, but you need to ask Mark for his permission. And the link to where you can ask his permission is in the description box beneath this video, because I think it needs to be distributed far and wide. I mean, have it in your back pocket, particularly for friends and relatives who come up with the classic diesel is cleaner than electricity that's made by burning, all those boring old chestnuts that we get thrown at us. It's always worth having this, to refer to, just to send them a link to this. So that's it. Please do enjoy. Don't forget our great EV giveaway. Subscribe and enter for the chance to win one of several electrifying prizes, including one of 4 electric cars. So the argument goes, electric vehicles don't pollute, but the electricity powering the electric vehicles does pollute. Some even say it pollutes even more than a gasoline or petrol burning car. If we're going to look beyond the EV itself to the energy that powers it, shouldn't we do the same for the fossil fueled combustion car? So what goes into producing the fuel that you burn in your car every day? Gasoline or petrol starts as oil, on average 5,900 feet below the surface of the earth. A great deal of oil is extracted using what is called a pump jack. Pump jacks don't run by themselves. In most cases, they use electricity. It takes, on average, 9,960 kilowatt hours of electricity every month to drive one pump jack. To put that in context, that is enough electricity to power a Tesla Model 3 for 34,860 miles. In the United States, there are an estimated 435,000 oil wells using pump jacks. Estimated electricity use for these wells is over 4,300 gigawatt hours a month. That is a lot of electricity, and that is just to get the oil out of the ground. If we use that electricity to power electric vehicles directly, it would be enough to power over 15 million electric vehicles for a month. That's just US oil wells on land? What about deep sea drilling? The most common way of powering an offshore oil rig is with a diesel generator. An average oil rig generator uses 20 to 30 metric tons of diesel per day. The electrical equivalent to this is 300,000 kilowatt hours. There are an estimated 1,470 offshore oil rigs in the world, using over 1.3 billion kilowatt hours of energy a month. All this oil pumping combined would be enough to power 19.5 million electric vehicles per month. This is just from the energy used to pump the oil out of the ground in the US and offshore. So not only does the fuel pollute when we burn it in our cars, we are also using a huge amount of electricity just to pump the oil that makes the fuel. Combining the pollution from the tailpipe emissions with the emissions generated to pump the oil out of the ground is not a pretty picture. Pumping oil is not clean. Millions of gallons are spilled into the ocean every year, causing havoc for fish and other wildlife. Then that oil needs to be transported. Most of the oil is pumped through pipelines. There are over 337,000 miles of pipeline in the world, carrying most of the 100 million barrels a day we consume. These pipelines use pump stations that use even more energy. Oil is also shipped. The oceans are unregulated as regards emissions, so ships use the cheapest, dirtiest fuel possible to keep costs down, making them one of the largest pollution sources on the planet. Shipping is responsible for an estimated 1 billion tons of CO2 per year, and 10% of that is shipping oil. Because these tanker ships pollute so much, many countries do not allow them to operate near their coastline, so they have to be towed into port where the oil is transferred to a refinery. Refining oil takes a huge amount of energy and generates even more pollution. Refining is done by heating oil up to 800 degrees Fahrenheit or 420 degrees centigrade. Heating 100 million barrels of oil a day to these temperatures requires an enormous amount of energy. Heating this oil generates so much pollution, refineries create a serious health hazard anywhere they operate. Refineries are the #1 pollution source in many major cities around the world. It is so bad that people living near these refineries have a marked increase of lung disease. Once the oil has been refined, it is transported to fuel stations in diesel trucks, creating even more pollution. Then this fuel is burned in cars and trucks, right in our cities where we live and breathe. These cars and trucks have internal combustion engines that are extremely inefficient. 70% of the energy from burning fossil fuels is wasted as heat, while only 30% goes to turn your wheels. So after we use all that electricity pumping oil out of the ground, refining it, transporting it, we then waste 70% when we burn it. Fossil fuel production is an incredibly dirty, inefficient process from start to finish. When we contrast all this to powering an electric vehicle, the difference is very stark. Electricity does not need to be pumped from thousands of feet underground, transported by trucks and trains, or pumped along pipelines. It does not need to be shipped overseas. It does not need to be refined, and it is not polluting where we live and breathe. Even if electricity produced from burning coal, the power plant is far away from population centres, transferred over power lines, keeping any direct pollution away from the population. And if it's powered with clean energy, it's not to finish. In the United States, 47% of electricity comes from sources that emit no CO2. In Europe, it is even better at 56%. And the percentage of clean energy is growing every year as coal and gas plants are being replaced by renewable energy sources. So what about the lithium used in EV batteries? Lithium is a metal that is mined in the deserts of Australia, China, Argentina, and Chile. Besides being a key ingredient in batteries, lithium is also ingested as a medicine for bipolar disorder. Much has been made about the environmental impact of lithium mining, but this is all a little bit overblown. Australia is the largest producer of lithium in the world. If there were any major environmental problems with this mining, some Australians would be talking about it. But what is Australia really talking about when it comes to pollution? Oil refining. Yes, oil refining is creating a much bigger environmental risk than all the lithium mining going on anywhere in the country. Australia is not a very densely populated country. They consume 1% of the world's oil supply and only refine 1/4 of the oil they consume. But they mine 50% of the world's lithium. So a country that only refines 1/4 of 1% of the world's oil and mines 50% of the world's lithium. The biggest contributor to pollution and risk to human health in Australia is oil refineries. That does not even take into consideration the drilling, pumping, transporting, and burning of this oil. This is just refining it. The more you look into it, the argument that battery production is somehow as bad as the cycle of fossil fuels is ridiculous. All the lithium mining in the world to date has not done anything like as much damage to the environment as just one major oil spill. So, what about the batteries? What happens to EV batteries when they get old and are discarded? When no longer practical in an electric vehicle, the batteries can be used as energy storage to power a home or business, giving them a second life. And when they're no longer any good for this, they are recycled, broken down to recover the valuable metals in these batteries to be used in the next generation of electric vehicles. It looks a bit silly to use so much electricity to pump oil out of the ground, create tons of pollution transporting and refining it, to finally waste 70% of it burning it in our cars when we could simply use that electricity directly to power electric vehicles, eliminating the pollution from refining and burning oil in inefficient internal combustion engines. It is obvious when you look at the big picture. Oil production is a dirty, wasteful process, especially when compared to the alternative powering EVs with renewable electricity.
Look at that. That doesn't look too good. Now it looks a little better. I think I'm going to try this one out. Okay, yeah, nice inside. Wow. Oh, sorry. Wow, this thing's fast. See ya.
What can you do? One of the last obstacles preventing many people from going electric, besides misinformation, is people who live in apartments and condominiums with shared parking. Many of these residents have no way to install a car charger. If you're a lawmaker, sit on a city council or a local council, if you serve on the board of a housing association, if you own rental property, you can do something to help. Vote to install car chargers, or indeed install them yourselves in car parks or on the street, so people who live in apartments can have a place to charge their electric vehicle. There are companies that even offer ways for you to make a profit from these chargers. Support the taxing of fossil fuels and using the subsidies to support the shift to electric vehicles. With the right incentives and political will, change can happen very quickly. In Norway, they have made a huge shift to electric vehicles in a very short time. Electric vehicle sales in Norway have reached over 50% of all vehicles sold. Support the installation of solar panels wherever possible. Going solar is now cheaper than buying electricity from the grid and starts paying for itself from day one. And if you are fortunate enough to own your own home, get an EV and install solar panels. You will save thousands on fuel and electricity and have the peace of mind knowing that you are not contributing to the horribly dirty oil and gas industry. Share this video, post it to forums like Reddit, Nextdoor, Facebook, and others to help spread the word. Lastly, this is an open source video. You are free to translate this video into another language for reposting. Contact us to download a version you can add a translated voiceover and text to. The day when our cities are clean of sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and other toxic chemicals and particulates emitted from tailpipes and oil refineries can happen. We have the technology to do this now. Supporting this transition to electric transportation will bring this day closer to fruition. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and stay clean.
How can we get this video? I have friends I would like to send it to.
Okay, so let me, in the chat, put in the link. Oops. Gotta get back to screen I can control here.
I'll put it on the Facebook page and the website too.
Okay. Let me check and make sure that this link didn't change.
Hey everybody, I'm Zach. And I'm Jesse. And you're watching Test.
I think that link might have changed. Let me grab the link from my file over here. I have it right over here. Let's see, where did it go now? I had it right in here. Okay, where? That's where I pulled it from to get. Oh, I think it's up here in between these pages. So I wasn't sure how many people are going to want to keep online here.
I want the video.
Yeah, here we go. All right.
Ken wants the video, Dave. You got to give us the video.
All right, here we go. In the chat, this came from Central Jersey EAA yesterday. I don't know if that's an official title or just words that they wrote, The Dirty Truth About Combustion Engine Vehicles, but you can see that it's descriptive. And there's the YouTube / and that's the link that will show that video. So yes, as they said, it's available to be freely spread around to everybody. And it answered questions that I've had in my mind for a long time, because we all know that the petroleum industry isn't advertising all their leakages and everything else. And I love the graphics in there where the offshore oil, you know, they drill and of course they leak, and the fish are the ones who get that. And then just as I said, the energy for the pump jacks, and just the thing I caught this time that I didn't catch before, of all the shipping around the world.
Right, that I've just heard.
10% of all the shipping is just to ship oil. And I thought, whoa, really? I mean, it's kind of the really amazing things that the petroleum industry, of course, never advertises. And so I've wondered before, yeah, if you just take the electricity that's used for pumping and refining oil and just put it into vehicles, I mean, they had a number of 14 million, 19 million vehicles or something. I mean, just, I'm gonna have to watch it again to catch some of the actual numbers in there, but I just thought that was worth sharing. I noticed out of our 30 people, about 15 stayed through this. This is the overtime, the extra credit part of the 2 hours. But I just thought it was really good. And rather than hold it till next month, although I might show it next month too, it depends on, you know, how many speakers we have and so forth. And so we'll see if it's, but I just didn't want to delay it a month.
It's on the Facebook page and on the website too.
Great, thanks, Colin.
That's really good stuff.
Yeah, and right before it showed it, I actually meant to state that Colin has already put the slides from Bailey on the, what is it called? File share portion of our website.
You found it.
Yes, yes. And so that's already on there. Zoom takes a day or two for the videos. They go through some kind of a preparation process or something, but once it's available, if Colin can put that out there, that'll be good too. So it's a delay because of Zoom's processing to get it ready, and we just make use of their storage on the cloud, and then it becomes available, and then it can be available through our website. So yeah, so folks who missed it tonight, I was thinking of the Sweet Brothers, they missed it, but Ken Jones, as you were asking about batteries, I was also thinking that they might be able to make some inputs. Of course, hopefully we'll be able to meet up some in person before too long. But so I'll wrap it up. If there's any other comments, make them now. Forever hold your peace. So great cooperation on everybody's part. Really appreciate it. Colin, your background of your camera there looks different than it normally is. You're in a different room, I guess.
Yeah, we finally finished the remodeling of the house, so yeah, we're back. Yeah.
Okay.
It only took a year.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole lot of people, unfortunately, doing unplanned remodeling around Houston and around a lot of Texas because of burst pipes, and that's another thing that's kind of mystified me. Is like there's other parts of the world that know how to build and not threaten big inconveniences and expenses. And I don't know if some people may have died from the water. We know people have died because of the cold spell, but build a house in a way that you don't have to take special measures, and if you don't, you have freezing and thawing of pipes and problems. But anyways,
somebody talks about Texas is a very cheap state to live in, but there is a crisis tax. Yeah, and when there's a crisis, you pay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's very true. Yeah. Weatherization would have gone a long way. So, all righty, we'll wrap it up here now. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
bye-bye.
you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.